So many of us go through school and our love of learning is just completely squashed to the point we feel like once we complete our degree, the learning is over because God, that was terrible.
Mm.
But the truth is, if you look at little children, every child loves learning. That is a natural human trait. So I'm looking at it now as a veteran homeschooling mom. I want to tell the new homeschooling moms that's one of the primary things you should pay attention to is don't kill the love of learning.
It's a superpower because then anything changes in the world of technology we don't know about, whatever it is, if they know how to learn, then they are going to be able to adapt versus someone who can only take instruction and needs structure from some authority to say, your next step is X, your next step is Y, your next step is Z. And so the level learning how to learn that is a game changer. If you kill it because you make learning horrible,
Yeah.
you really handicapped them.
I hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bitcoin for Family show, where every guest is your new BFF. That's your Bitcoin friend forever. I'm Scott from Shamray, and it's an honor to have you here once again. Thanks to everyone who's been watching or listening. I hope you're finding this show fun and educational. And if you have been enjoying the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it. If you're really feeling generous, go ahead and drop a comment or a review. Every bit helps in helping spread the word to other Bitcoin families. Now on to this week's episode. I am excited to welcome a husband and wife duo. Thanks for taking the time to join, Scott and Tali Lindberg. How are you guys doing?
Hey, Scott, doing awesome. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Scott.
It's a pleasure to have you guys here. It's been on the list to get you guys on since we started, and kind of getting to know you guys going back to, I was trying to make sure I was doing my years correctly, Scott. Pretty sure it was Bitcoin 2022 when we met in person for the first time.
23. Oh, man.
Was
I
it
was thinking
23?
of the same thing. And I thought it was 23. You're right.
It's
It
one
might
of those
be
years.
22. It was 22.
Yep. So either the case, no, it's been fun to get to you guys and seeing Hodl Up and everything else get created, which we can touch on during the show. But before we do all that, let's jump into some fun icebreakers so the audience can get to know a little bit better. Actually, before that, maybe tell the little audience a little bit about your family, how many kids there are and that side of things.
We have 4 kids. They're all adults now. We homeschool all of them from newborn all the way through high school. We had 2 that started college. Well, actually, all 4 of them started college. 2 stayed in, 2 dropped out. So we're seeing different aspects of how the kids choose to operate in today's economy. So it's
Very
fun
nice.
to have a little bit of a hindsight talking about parenting, actually.
I'm sure, I'm sure the audience will enjoy some of that kind of. You've gone through a lot of the weeds over the years since they're older, so we can touch on that as we dive into the deeper questions. But now that groundwork is set, we can dive into the icebreakers. So first up, as I mentioned before, you guys have a game, Hodl Up, and some other ones. So sticking with that theme to start with, if your kids can design the perfect family game night, what game would they pick and why?
Interesting. The perfect game night for the kids. It's a little bit different. Their style of what they like to play is they like the louder party type games. So I'm not sure what perfect for them is. They all have different personalities. One of the what's a video game that they like? Quiplash or something like that. They like some of the kind of games where you can really be silly and you don't need a lot of time to set up. So for them, it would be something where they could just be goofy, be themselves, laugh a lot. You can come in and out and eat and drink as you want. So something with less structure would be more ideal for them.
Yeah, makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Not educational like I would hope. No.
Maybe one day.
Yeah, when they have kids, they might change their tune.
Exactly. Okay, question number 2. What's that one homemade meal that brings you guys all together that you guys enjoy the most? Is there one off the top of your heads?
I know which one I'd choose.
Dumplings?
Oh,
What?
hot pot for New Year's.
Hot pot. That's a toss-up. That's a toss-up.
Why don't you explain to them hot pot?
Hot pot is a traditional dish that the Chinese would eat usually on New Year's Eve. And the idea is to sit around a big pot of hot soup. It's heated, so it has that boiling aspect. And then you just have small plates of different food around the table. And then whatever you choose to eat, meat, vegetables, seafood, or anything else, you just dip it into the soup. And when it's cooked, you take it out. And so it's a meal that's meant to last a very long time. You have lots of conversations. You cook your food at the table. So it's meant to be a very, very social time. And that's something we all look forward to. New Year's, but
New Year's.
also sometimes just for get-togethers. That's what we prefer to do.
It takes a lot of preparation. So it's the equivalent of trying to prepare for a Thanksgiving meal because there's so many different types of food and they all have to be cut up and then split out on little plates and multiple. And now we have enough people in the family that you actually need multiple pots boiling at the same time. And so now you have a whole other, it takes a lot of work to set up and prepare for. And that whole time you have people who are kind of teamed up with each other, whatever project, whatever part of that they're doing, setting it up or cutting or other things. So it's definitely meant to take a long time, but in terms of people who have never experienced before, think about trying to prepare for Thanksgiving the day of.
Got to make it all hot. Make sure it's all ready. No, I have got to experience not a home cook, a hot pot meal, but here in San Diego, there's a number of hot pot restaurants. There's an Asian district with all different cuisines, and we've gone to the hot pot ones before, so they are delicious. I will also co-sign the dumplings. So either the dumplings or the hot pot, when we're in town, you can whip on up.
Exactly.
Perfect. Question number 3. If your family were animals, which animal would each of your kids and you guys be based on your personalities?
See, this is why we can't even listen to your other podcasts and try to prepare for your show because
Yep, they're all different.
there's no way, if they're all different, there's no way you could prepare for that.
Well, when our kids were little, one of their favorite movies was Madagascar, the original one. And we all were one of the characters. So I was Melman, the giraffe, who hates nature, which actually quite reflects myself. I love camping, but not in the woods. I want to have an RV with an AC and places to cook and a soft bed to sleep on. So I'm Melman. Scott is the lion. And then Gloria, the hippo, was our oldest. Nolan was what?
I
Which one
can't
was
remember who was
Nolan?
the lemur and who
I
was
think-
the zebra.
Yeah. There's the zebra.
Let's just
Marty.
answer the question.
Okay.
It would be the Madagascar animals.
Yes.
There you go.
Oh, what do we have in there? We had a lemur, a hippopotamus, a giraffe.
A lion.
Bruh.
Thank you.
What am I
Penguins. We have
missing?
penguins
The
in there.
penguins. Yes. How can we
Okay,
forget the
so
penguins?
that would be the 6 for the
Yes.
family.
Very nice. I'm glad you got to have that firsthand experience of actually turning into animals once to be able to answer the question. See, it's like I knew there was something back there.
Every parent knows what it's like. Your kids are going to want to play, and you're going to do stuff that you just hope isn't recorded.
Nowadays, most of it will be recorded, so it'll come back for us. Okay, next one. If you guys could have a family picnic anywhere in the world, where would you go and what would you bring to eat?
Anywhere in the world.
You can just magically be there. So you don't have to worry about travel.
I would just say, I think a lot of us really like the beach, and we have mostly visited the East Coast and not necessarily the West Coast. So honestly, any beach with everybody together and a frisbee, which is very, very big in our household. Ultimate frisbee is a big thing, and maybe the soccer. And then in terms of food, gosh, everybody likes different things. Lots of fresh fruit for sure.
Where's that place they go to after adopting Bitcoin? Raton? Isn't that where I'm pretty sure they have a resort?
Yeah.
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 Definitely. Rotan is where Amity Age is in Tucson.
And I think that would be that place looks absolutely gorgeous.
Honestly,
Yes,
I
we
think when we're together, the location doesn't matter so much. It's just that we are interacting and spending time together. And then the ability to play on the beach and then run in and out of the water. That's the most important thing. So
The kids would want to jet ski, and they're going to want to do, all the different activities you can do on the water. They're gonna need to have access to that. So it has to be a little bit of a resortish.
yeah,
Feel
because
good.
they're older now. They don't just want to hang with mom and dad digging holes in the sand anymore. So
Yep. Understandable. Well, I can co-sign Rotan. I thought before going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, this is probably 10 years ago, Mallory and I were able to go down there and did scuba diving. So it's a
Really?
beautiful island. And
Really? Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And so for those Bitcoiners listening, look up Amity Age and Doosan and what he's put together. So if you do go down there, you can have a Bitcoin experience. I know there's a bunch of places on the island that are accepting Bitcoin, from restaurants to dive shops. So Roatan is an awesome place. And if you're just coming to the West Coast, Tali, you can come say hi in San Diego. So my kids
Sounds
are
good.
actually at a They're at a homeschool event at the bay, sitting in the sand. I got a picture right before hitting record here. So that's where they're
Careful what
doing
you
their
offer,
homeschooling.
Scott. We might just take you up on it.
And we're
Come
gonna
on
have
out.
10 people. We're gonna
No,
have
yeah, we're
10
all gonna just like
people.
swoop
So
in.
it's just
Yeah.
not gonna be me and Scott. It's gonna be the kids and their partners.
No problem. Just as long as you make the hot pot and the dumplings, we're good.
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. Thinking back to when your kids were younger, what's one of the funny excuses they gave to get out of doing chores, and did it work?
Doing chores.
Or I guess having them do anything. Guess it doesn't have to be a chore, but
Well,
if you're
okay,
trying to,
so as a homeschooling family,
yeah,
I try not to teach subjects I'm not very familiar with. So I thought it was important for the kids to learn Latin, and it was not one of the languages I know. I also didn't want to teach science because of the amount of preparation that needs to go into creating labs and things like that. So I did outsource those to a local Catholic private school that had a homeschool co-op. And as a requirement, even though my kids were only attending 1 day a week, they had to wear the school uniform. And we have to get up very, very early in the morning, and they have to be dropped off 8 o'clock. And then it's a series of very strict Catholic structured day with logic, Latin, and then the sciences. And the first thing I have to say is the uniform was so ugly. It's like, you know, the Sound of Music when Maria first goes into the captain's house and he goes, turn you around. And then he's like, oh my God, it's the dress. Okay, that was the uniform they had to wear. So awful. And then, of course, our co-op was every Monday and every Monday morning. So the kids will be all fine. All weekend it'll be fine. And then Monday morning, mysteriously, the boys would come down with some kind of issue. My stomach doesn't feel good. You know, I feel like throwing up. I feel really hot. And every Monday. And the girls would get up and they wouldn't complain. They didn't like it, but they would, you know, get dressed in their uniform and they would be ready to go. And the boys would just kind of take turns lingering in their bed, complaining about something. Eventually, at first I was like, oh gosh, maybe something's going around. So I would let them stay home. Well, after it happened a few times, their teacher told the girls, tell your mom to give the boys some vitamin C because there's no reason for them to be sick all the time. But mysteriously, at the end of Monday, they would be all well. They're like, it really worked. Staying in bed all day really helped me get better. So that was their excuse every Monday morning while we were part of this co-op was...
They were pretty good at it, though.
They were really good. They were quite convincing because it's not very easy to convince me that they're too ill to go do something. Yeah.
Yep.
That was the only thing I can think of.
I was
That's a
going to
good
say
one.
picking up dog poop, but you know that's good. The story about them faking their illness, the Monday illness, yeah,
The Monday illness,
just for the boys.
I think a lot of people have those Monday illnesses as they get older too, when they don't want to get up and go into the office. So I think it carries forward. And yes, Scott, there's many, whether it's dog poop or we have 2 birds, and Charlotte is never wanting to help clean the cage. It's always the worst day of her life. So if you have animals, every parent out there can understand that one too. Well, great that you guys successfully made it through the icebreakers. Congratulations without having to prepare, so we can kind of get on to more of the questions about your family. And it's always fun, you know, kind of getting to know, you know, your origin story as Scott and Tali. So I know you guys met each other at Yale. Kind of how did that first encounter happen, and kind of the early days of dating each other?
So we met in a coffee shop. So she was a year behind me, and they have an orientation for the new folks the first years, and they're always assigned a second year. So Tali came in. She was with my classmate who was her orientation advisor or whatever fancy term they gave to it. So that's when we first met. And then the second time was actually kind of interesting for us because the second time was in the mailroom. She had made a very, very big impression on me. So I remembered her name. All right. And when I saw her, I went up to her, said, hey, Tali. And she is looking at me and she is just like, I don't know who you are. And this is just a week later, right? It's not like a lot of time had passed. But my impression on her was so small. This is my story. She's going to tell you a different story. But I was just like, wow, she doesn't even remember who I am. I just blend in like all the other guys around here. But that's how I remember it. So you want to defend yourself?
I do, actually. So the first week of the first year on campus, we meet each other in a lot of situations. They really trying to get the group together. So I literally had just met 200 people in person, exchanging phone numbers and names and background stories, etc. And it was very intensive for a week. And so that's my excuse for not remembering people's faces because there were so many. But anyway, right before he said hi to me in the mailroom, some other guy had just come up to me and started talking. And then mid-sentence, he stopped himself and said, "Hold on, wait, you're not the right person," and just turned around and left. So I'm sitting there going, and the whole time I didn't say anything because this guy just like came up and had this whole thing. And I thought, is there somebody else walking around who looks exactly like me? Which, sometimes happens. Right after that, Scott came up to me and started talking. I'm like, there's got to be another person who is walking around looking like me because I thought I honestly, I couldn't remember his face because I had just met 200 people. And that's my defense is number one,
So
an intense week. And then number two, what happened right before he walked up to me.
it's actually miraculous we stayed together, Scott. We had one of our first times we went out to lunch. This is before we were dating, but I reviewing her resume or whatever excuse I had to talk to her. We go and grab lunch and I'm trying to compliment her. I said, because there's about a third of the class will go investment banking, a third will go consulting, a third would go like nonprofit. That was kind of the stereotypical class. And she just didn't seem like an investment banker to me. I'm thinking people who they like strippers and they cuss a lot and they're really crude, and that wasn't her at all. So I said to her, I asked her what she wants to do. And she said, well, I want to go into investment banking. And my reaction was like, you're way too nice for that. That was what my thought was. But when I said that, the way she took it was, you chauvinistic, whatever person, you think that women can't be bankers, right? That's how it was received. We had all these things in there. It was miraculous that we worked through that.
I'm glad it all worked out. And kind of, what was that first date that you guys ultimately went on once Scott stopped pretending to look at your resume?
You're just going to keep on picking all the controversies. We have a, if you would do the Harry Met Sally and put us on the couch, we have a different version of the first date. My version of this it was a Halloween gathering, if you will. There's a bar that is for the grad students, basically. So the undergrad aren't supposed to go there. And it was Halloween weekend. And so we went to that together. We went out to the store to pick out outfits together. We got ready together. We took another couple there. I think we even went to dinner. Like everything was like a date to me. So that was what I call date. I believe her impression is when we went up to West Point for a football game or something, and she went with me. I believe that's because the formal asking is the difference in this. So she's shaking her head. So,
well, I don't think if it's a spontaneous day of hanging out counts as a date. You sort of have to plan a date. So that Halloween party to me was just hanging out. So our first official day is the West Point outing, in my opinion.
No, we still don't agree on this, Scott. So just don't even try to get resolution.
I won't. Because one day you can set up kind of like some sort of judge panel to figure out what the answer is. Maybe your kids can be the jury to decide. Well,
they've heard the story before.
Then, you guys, successfully went on that first date or second date, whatever we want to call there. Fast forward, got married, ultimately started welcoming those kids to your life. What was kind of, as that first child came in, what was the most unexpected thing that you started learning about each other as you began to be parents together?
Well, this is where it really comes back to the reason that we're talking today. We're talking about families. So Tali had this idea. I don't know how much studying she had done, how much talking she had done with, like her aunt was a nanny in the area. And she basically said right after our oldest was born that she wanted to stay home with her and raise her and have the relationship with her. And that basically meant if we were going to do this, we would have one income. And that might mean that we may not be able to get as many of the luxurious things that our classmates will be doing, especially for those if you have a double income type of situation. So for example, those working the investment banking job or consulting or other types of things. And basically we were aligned that it was family first. and the relationship with the kids, anything that we could do to make that happen, whatever that meant with income or moving or whatever it was going to take, the number one thing was going to be family. And so that was, we were already in alignment. We knew that we were aligned on families beforehand, but after our oldest was born, that was when everything really, really came home for us. And that's when we had to have conversations with our respective families about that, because that was not what our respective sides of the family expected from us.
I think what was surprising for me was that I decided to stay home because that was never the plan. It was always the plan for me to continue to work, to take advantage of my education, to get high paying jobs, and then to put our kids through the best private schools, the best tutors, so that they can follow our path to go into brand name schools and have success in their life. So the plan always was that I will continue to work. That was the part that at least surprised me the most, even to myself.
Was there a certain thing or moment, Tali, that kind of made you realize that that was the kind of your passion and what you wanted to do and kind of make that U-turn?
Well, there are a few things that from my past and just from my memory that I think came together in my mind when I was holding the baby. One of them was when I was pregnant, I started looking for daycare centers for the baby because I wanted to make sure she went to a good place. I asked around and I went to the most reputable one with the longest wait list, thinking that that would be the best place for them. But I asked them if I could just observe for a couple of hours one day. And I went in, and it was a very high priced, very exclusive place. You walk in and everything's sterile. It's like a colorful hospital. You walk in and nobody's allowed to wear shoes, or they have, the wrap around their shoes. Everybody's always hand sanitizing. All the cubby holes are beautifully labeled. All the kids come in with their nice bags. And, they've got all these certificates on the walls. And I sat there and I was like, oh, that's so impressive. It's amazing. It's very clean. And I sat there and I specifically remember there was a baby that was dropped out. She was not a baby. She was a toddler because she was able to sit up, and a worker. And they really boast how many adults go to, or how few kids are assigned to one adult. So it's like 1 to 3 or something. So it's very low compared to another daycare center, which could be like 1 to 10 or something. But anyway, I saw this worker sit on this beautiful sterilized foam surface, all primary colors, indoor playground, etc. Sit on the floor next to this child and had zero interaction. The child literally just sat there, just like spacing out, looking in one direction. And the worker sat next to the child and looked the other direction. And I remember sitting there as a pregnant mom and almost coming to tears thinking, this is what I will be paying for. A person who doesn't care about my child sitting next to my child because the ratio is so good. So that was one memory I had. And my aunt, who I was going to hire as my nanny, was telling stories about the family that she worked for. And the family was like really loving toward this child. Both parents worked, obviously, which is why my aunt was brought in. And the child attached herself to my aunt and called her mom, because the mom she never saw. And when the mom saw that this child called the nanny mom, she was so angry and offended that she fired my aunt. And I thought, that's what's going to happen to me if I hand my baby now over to a nanny. Even though it's better than the daycare center, truthfully, I would have no relationship with this person. She won't know me. I won't know her. She's going to grow up and I'll be paying for everything, but she's not going to know who I am. I will know who her friends are. I don't know her teachers. I don't know her likes and dislikes. I don't know what she's afraid of or what makes her. I wouldn't know anything because I would leave the house before she woke up and I would come home after she went to sleep. And I'll be working 80 hours a day while she's growing up with somebody else.
80 hours a day?
80 hours a week. And I just didn't want that. So it was like a combination of all of those memories as I was holding the baby. And I just thought, I can't do it. I had the baby so that I can have a relationship with the baby. And that's when I talked to Scott about staying home.
Well, those are two definitely powerful stories that leave an impact. I'm sure there's others that feel the same way. And Scott, you mentioned that part of that process was going to talk to your respective families that maybe thought the other things. I'm sure there's many people out there listening who, whether they're in homeschool already or thinking about staying home, who maybe are fearing that conversation with their families. How did that go? And are there tips that you guys learned from kind of talking to your families about that process?
Well, the first thing is that Tali and I were aligned. We were in agreement on what we were doing. It wasn't as if one of us was just telling the other one what we were going to do. And that's like having your North Star. If you know why you're going to do something, then the rest of it is just a matter of committing to that course of action. The flavor of it on my side was I had gone through public schools, and my parents took it as some type of indictment against, as if they had made a bad decision with me. They took it that way. And we had to basically walk that back and say, this is our decision about our kid. It's not about you. This is just what we want to do. And we had to kind of walk it back. This is before Bitcoin. This is before all the types of things that you hear all the time in the Bitcoin space. And so didn't really have a lot of the frameworks that we have now to try to explain it. I don't think they would have worked anyway. This was an emotional type of discussion. It was more, hey, you're in the Asian community, the idea of it's, I don't know how you say it, it's the going to a prestigious school. This is a big deal, right? You went to Yale. You're supposed to go and have a career. And I am still the bad guy on that side of the family because I'm the one that got her pregnant 4 times. She's at home with the kids, not working. It's because I'm the one that derailed her from this career that she was supposed to have.
Well, in terms of suggestions for people who might be somewhat anxious about sharing this with a family that may not support the idea, is just you have to see on your ground, because I got to a point where I was talking to my mom and she was trying to talk me out of it. And I said, you're not going to convince me to put my kids in school. And I think we just need to agree to disagree, because we can stop this kind of round and round thing. And that's where we had to leave it. Ultimately, though, when the kids will grow up, his parents, his mom specifically, told me one day, in hindsight, she said, I'm so glad you decided to homeschool, and I wish I had done that with Scotty, so him. And that was such a affirmation for us making that decision, because it was very lonely. It was very lonely to know both sides of the families disagreed. And when I needed help, I wouldn't reach out because I knew that they disagree with my decision. And and your wife knows how difficult and challenging it is to live a day and be responsible for every aspect of your child's life, including all of their education. There's no breathing room, right? Especially because your nights are probably interrupted by the kids for a variety of reasons. And during the day, not only do you have to be mom, nurse, housekeeper, but also teacher, principal, guidance counselor, you name it, right? It's a lot of pressure. And if you don't have support, it is very, very challenging.
It comes back to the popular book, Know Your Why, or what's it called?
Yeah.
Is it Know Your Why? I think it's called, yeah. If you are aligned, you and your partner are aligned on your why, then you have more agency than you realize. A lot of people think they have to do something because of family or other reasons, or maybe you're in a district or a region where there are compulsory regulations around education. As a parent, you have a lot of agency. So if you're aligned on your why, it's about taking that first step and committing. It's if you realize the low time preference type of discussion, that's another popular phrase we like to use in the community. If you're thinking about that long-term relationship, what you want to have with your family and your kids, then that should drive you to commit. And then it's the courage the grit to go through all the experiences you're going to experience. But make sure you're aligned. And if you're aligned on why you're doing it, then hey, hold hands, ready, let's go, and commit to it.
And that's not it's a perfect mental state for the homeschooling side of things. But to your point, Scott, for your marriage in general, just knowing your why, making sure you guys are on that right path, and then whether you disagree or agree on your first date, you'll still be sitting there, 20 plus years later, like you guys together. And so it's nice to hear, Scott, sounds like your family started coming around and got more supportive towards the tail end with that comment to Tali. Tali, do your family start turning the curve as they start, your kids grow up and becoming, what they are today? Or is it still a topic that they disagree with?
Very much so. Very much so. We don't talk about it.
I mean, you talk about families. Families are so important. The statists are going to try to take away the family, right? That's a core idea. And our kids value family. So one of our 4 got married. Wait, was he 20 at the time? I think he was 20 at the time. And that was something that outside our core family here was like, what are you doing? How can you let your kid get married? Well, he's 20, first of all, so he's 18. He can do this. And we have our, and now you fast forward a year and now another one of our kids is engaged. And the reaction is still the same. Like, how can you let them do this? You have to stop them. And we're like, we don't want to stop them. And even if we did, this is their choice. We raised them to be critical thinkers. We raised them to live their life. We didn't raise them to do what we wanted. And it's still not something that, I just don't want to waste my breath trying to convince someone outside the immediate family, because I just don't want to waste my time. And 2, it's not their decision. It's not up for them to decide. I like the fact that our kids focus on family. I think we taught them well in that regard.
I also think that on both sides of our families, they have been very, very entrenched in that traditional sense of education equals success. And for them, you establish your career first and then you get married. It's a very kind of old-fashioned way of looking at the various life stages you're supposed to go through. And as Bitcoiners, we're starting to question a lot of those assumptions. And for whatever reason, our kids just have really challenged those assumptions all the way from the beginning. We were not expecting them to challenge the marriage part, but they did. And ultimately, everybody has to walk their own journey. And who are we to say that we know better how they should live their life? And right now, the more we learn in the Bitcoin space about all the lies that have been sold to us about, the proper way to live your life, the proper way to ensure success, the proper way to live toward old age, whatever you want to call it, like we're literally challenging all of those assumptions, and our kids are naturally already doing that, which for us, well, at least for me, is a great opportunity to even take another step back and re-look at society, world, life in general.
No, very well said. And Scott, on your side of things, obviously, so Tali was home helping doing the homeschool side of things, and you were going to work. What was that like from your perspective? You were away, obviously still a very involved dad, but from the outside perspective of the homeschool day to day, what was that like for you?
So there was a lot of stress. Boy, there's a few turning points in there that would take longer than a podcast to get into. So I took jobs and stayed in jobs longer than I should have. And I did it out of fear. And so again, a lot of people in the space will echo things like be the change you want to be and don't support the system and that type of thing. My mentality at the time was I am responsible for this family, for the income, so we can feed them and have a roof. I need to make sure we have medical coverage. That's all on me. And so at the time, I would just do everything I could that when I was home to try to be present with them. The hours that I was working at the job made that difficult because I was usually pretty tired. And so I was just physically drained, and I would fall asleep reading to the kids when they were little. Take something like the books behind you on your shelf there. Imagine sitting down with and you can't even get through like a page of it. And you're like, that was me. But I did my best. I would build them. I was the one that would build the forts or the monkey bars or whatever weird things that were a little bit outside of Tali's comfort zone. And so my way of contributing was more the physical, let's just do something crazy kind of thing. Let's go put the jump house in the living room type of thing. We had a blow up jump house, for example. And Tali didn't want to lose the kids outside because she's in the zone defense. And so we set it up inside the house, and we did a lot of things. So just any kind of home improvement types of things we needed to do to support the family, whatever we needed to set up for them. That was my job, and to be as present as I could. In hindsight, if I could go back 20 years and tell my younger self, I would basically say, you have everything you need to go and do the entrepreneur route. Just do it. Commit to it. It's worth it in the long run. At the time, I was living in a very high time preference fear type of mode, and I didn't even realize it. It wasn't until we went on the journey of the last 3 to 5 years and really got into a lot of the subjects that we spent so much time on with Bitcoin, like Austrian economics and all this, that I actually had the words to, our framework rather, to look at that. At the time, though, my job was just to be as present as I could. Be at the dinner table, be there with the kids at the games or whatever activities I could get to, build whatever kind of in the house or outside the house, whatever I could do to help them with that. And that was my job, just to be as present as I could possibly be when I was home.
Very nice. And, Tali, Scott mentioned kind of being on the zone defense, with the 4 kids, which I'm sure was stressful. How did you manage, especially as they got older and they're all kind of a range of ages, a range of abilities, academically speaking? How did kind of your day-to-day structure work where you're trying to teach different ranges and ages and subjects between the 4? I'm sure there's many people out there who are curious about that aspect.
Yeah, what I did, because Scott was working such long hours and we moved all the time, was every time we moved and we were strangers in a new place, my focus became, let's go out and make friends, because we had no social support otherwise. Everywhere we went, I signed up for everything under the sun, because that's how you're going to have more exposure with other people and the opportunity to make friends, build a support network. So I would literally just be running them all over town during that time period. We would do schoolwork in the car. Ultimately, I noticed that because there's just shy of 5 years difference between my oldest and youngest, that one person could not teach all the different grades anymore. So I combined them into a one schoolroom situation, same subject, and then I will have a more tough assignment for the oldest one and then the less tough assignment for the younger one. But any kind of extracurricular activity, if one person signed up for it, all 4 of them signed up for it. Everybody did dance, everybody did gymnastics, everybody swam, everybody was in karate, because that's one place I can bring them to. But for that reason, they also were able to share stories that they could all literally participate in. They knew all the same people, they knew all the same teachers. And when I made a deliberate effort to put my youngest child, who was at the time 3rd grade, into a separate school environment so that he can be with other kids his own age, it actually backfired on me, because he was so used to seeing himself as his older siblings, a peer of his older siblings. And at that time, 4 or 5 years, that's a big age gap. The ability range is huge. So I was like, okay, that's not fair to him. I'm going to put him in a separate situation. So I brought him to a part-time, like a homeschooling co-op. It was 2 days a week. And after the first day of class, I said, how did it go? And he said, Mom, why did you put me in a school with all these babies? I said, babies? They're all your age. Some of them, like most of them, are actually older than you. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. They don't know anything, because he's comparing them to his older siblings. So after a year of doing that, I said, at least maybe you don't make friends that are your own age, even if academically you don't really see eye to eye, because he is quite advanced because of his exposure with his older siblings. It just did not work out. So at the end of the 1 year, I said, do you want to continue? He was like, no. I do not want to spend time with these young people. So that's going to backfire on me. But as they got older, it became easier and easier for them to do the same assignments. So ultimately, I had one graduate and then 3 other ones graduate right after her, because my youngest one just ended up doing the same work as the older one. But that's what worked out for us. I know other families wouldn't necessarily follow that path.
Yeah, there's a couple things in there, Scott, that actually there's many things in there. One of which is the idea that you should segregate kids by age and that somehow they're going to be at the same developmental level like we do in a public school. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit. And what happens is people underestimate what the kids can learn, and they underestimate what the kids can do in a social situation. And on the academic side, if you, it's a whole separate subject, but if you actually let them advance at their own pace on things, the homeschooling opportunity, they can do amazing things. So we as a culture, we're holding our kids back about what they have to do at a certain level. We don't want them to know too much, to be bored at the next level, whatever. And socially, the FUD in homeschooling from people who don't homeschool is you're not going to be socialized. Actually, you don't. How well do you really socialize if you're told to sit in a seat and you're going to go in the hallways and you have all that structure and you're only around people your own age versus a homeschooler who learns how to deal with people of different ages, including adults. And so we underestimate what kids can do in terms of their interactions socially as well. So there's the academic side, there's the social side. And yeah, for our youngest, that we did put him in a box because now we never babied of course, when they're like a little infant. Okay. But we never talked to our kids once they were mobile and speaking. We didn't speak to them in any kind of baby tones. When we talked to them like, now you might kneel down so you could be eye to eye. So they just understood this is how people talk to each other. So to them, they could go up and they can talk to someone, whether it's at a restaurant because they want to place an order or it's with relatives of a different age or whatever it is. They can interact with a lot more people than someone who's gone through a public school where it's been very restrictive. They have only people who are immediately around them of their own age. And so I think there's a couple of deep rabbit holes you could go down, but we're holding our kids back. The way our current of school is as a culture is really holding back the kids' potential, and the academics is one part of it.
I do want to add something that if I could go back and do differently, I would. So if we take away the fact that we were moving all the time and I signed them up for different activities so that they could make friends. If we didn't move that many times and we had a stable local network, I would have given them a lot more free time, like the way I had it, because I was allowed to be bored. And during the time when there was nothing to do, my mind was very active and I was creating all kinds of stuff in my head. Whereas when I was shuttling the kids from one thing to another, everything was structured. Every moment of their day was busy. And ultimately, the only time they had free to themselves was between the activities or on the weekends when we didn't have to go to a game or a recital or a practice or a rehearsal or something like that. And I wish I had given them more of that to allow them to have time for boredom.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Because nowadays, I feel like most parents feel like they have to entertain their children so that they are not bored. And we rob them of the ability to use their brain in such a different way, like we got to do. I don't feel like most kids get to do that anymore today.
Yeah, a very safe environment. Well, I don't even call it safe. A very controlled environment versus an environment where you could go out and you had to be back when the street lights came on, kind of thing.
Well, there's a book behind me. I'll send you the link, but I think it's called The Lost Child in the Woods. The Lost Child in the Woods. And they were talking about how important it is for kids to have a private, safe place to go in nature to play. So in the book, they were talking about like just sitting, like laying down on the forest floor and allowing insects to crawl over you and looking at the sky and just kind of observe, which is a little bit too much for me, but some kids like that. And some kids, he was actually just saying having a place like a treehouse, like the old stories that we hear our grandparents talk about. Like they had a treehouse that they nailed up with 3 boards with rusty, but that was their space. That was where they went to daydream. So I tried to give that to our kids, but every time we moved, it was just not possible. So for the parents who are listening out there, if you got to do what you got to do. So idealistically, of course, we want them to be out in the woods and playing with bugs and building tree houses. But if that's not possible, at least give them downtime so that they can use their imagination.
Yeah, it's okay to be bored. I agree with that. The moving was due to me and the fiat jobs we were talking about before. That's what was driving that. And once we got to where we are now, the kids could go out in the woods and there's a small creek back there and they'll play with the turtles or whatever else they could find. And so they did get it. It's just, but I would agree, if you could have stability in and then try to give more freedom. And 100%, boredom is okay. Let them go figure out what they're going to do with their friends or siblings.
Without a phone. Or them without a phone.
Yep. No, that's a good tip for this day and age. And, I'll co-sign kind of the benefit of the boredom. And then speaking as, a parent, it is tough. Sometimes it's easier to not have the boredom, like you said, Tali, to keep the activities going for yourself, just to keep your brain stimulated and to keep the whining. Because, whenever they are bored, there is that moment where they're complaining. But if you can kind of get over that hurdle, it does work out, but it is a tough one.
Scott, I mean, just to build on that, you can see it. You go to a restaurant and you'll see a parent on their phone and they're sitting next to their kid who has their phone or their pad or whatever it is that they're working on. So when you're spending time together, it's okay for you to be bored with them, right? Without that screen, and just giving them something to keep them occupied. It's not, in the long run, it's going to hurt your relationship. So being bored, having to do a puzzle, draw, go get a box and make a fort, go do something. But yeah, I think there's lessons for parents in that as well.
But they also, I can't remember which study it was now, but they were talking about the difference between giving a child a doll that looks exactly like a person or a very, very rough resemblance of a doll to the child. And ultimately, the child with the thing that is not beautiful or perfect is the one who gets to use more for mind and more for involvement in the playing, so they play longer. Whereas if you give them a perfect baby doll that looks exactly like a baby and sounds like a baby and everything is already done for you version, they end up getting very bored with that perfect toy.
Yeah, Scott, this doesn't fit exactly with this, but the idea of giving your kids freedom to go figure things out too with structure. And it goes back to the structure of schools. There's a great video. I think if you search Japanese kindergarten on YouTube, you'll see it. I designed this circle, there are no walls, and they talk about how kids will naturally take risks, that you have to let them take risks. They have to be able to explore, and they track the kid. This one boy, I guess, did the equivalent of like 3 miles running around.
Before the first class.
And so you compare that to a structure where you come in, you have to sit in a whatever your seat is, and you can't move around. And then you're saying, well, we're going to label you with some kind of disorder, and the pharmacies have drugs that, your insurance will pay for, right? It's like this idea that there's so many things backwards with how we do things. And these first principle ideas of letting kids have some freedom, letting kids take risks, letting kids be bored. These are first principle ideas. Kids actually love to learn and love to explore. And yet there's a stereotype that kids hate school. Well, it's not the kid's fault. It's the structure that we're putting them in is unnatural. And so there's a whole bunch of interconnected first principles that we're talking about here. But it's once you see those things, that goes back to, okay, what is my why? Why am I going to homeschool? Do I want, which of these two worlds am I, maybe on the spectrum, I can't get all the way to 100% freedom, but on that spectrum of super controlled, no creativity, no critical thinking to wide open, anything goes. I want my kids closer to the way that I grew up, where you had some freedom, you could take risks, you could fall off your bike or get lost in the woods or whatever it is. So there's some principles on there, but they all come back to like, what do you want why are you doing this? Which way do you want what kind of experience do you want your kid to have, and which one is going to be healthier for them in the long run?
Yep. And I'll give a little behind the scenes here and co-sign to the boredom and freedom. One of the benefits is you never know what your kids can make, craft you. And there's always crafts going on in our house, and they're usually spread across this office table here. And so you get, for those listening, watching on YouTube, you get, fun craft projects like this, or,
Nice.
What do we have here? Some sparkles and some rocks, they're all beautiful in their own way. So for those parents out there that are listening, you will get an endless supply of, random crafts and things that are created, most likely spread across your house. I can't turn the computer around because it's an absolute disaster over there, but that's because there's always something going on.
Yeah,
exactly. Kind of one thing that pops into my head as I think about the future of homeschooling that you guys have already lived through is, at what age, Tali, did you really see maybe a shift from being more hands-on with the day-to-day, having to really sit with them and go through the learning, to where it was more they were taking the lead and you were maybe the stepping back slightly and coming in to check things or slightly lead in a different way? Was there an age or grade level that kind of made that transition?
I actually have always had to do that with my kids because it was me versus four, and because of our moves, I was alone most of the time. So it was always, here's your assignment, do that. Then I go to the next kid, check, go to the next kid, check. And then I just keep rotating around. So in terms of them doing their work, they were always able to do it themselves until the boys got a little bit older and the demand was on unnatural skills that they didn't naturally feel inclined to do, like handwriting. My boys are like, why is that necessary? Then it was more of, I have to sit on top of them and make sure they do it. Ultimately, the question is that worth my time and their time? Because some people argue that it's irrelevant and will become irrelevant. Some people say it's a matter of self-discipline, and some people say there's some kind of connection between brain development and such, and you have to make that choice yourself. But I think the assumption we have to make as parents that's so lacking today in society is that every person is naturally inclined to thrive in whatever way they feel drawn to. So if they fight you about learning Latin, is it necessarily because you're doing a poor job as a teacher? Is it because the student is being defiant? Or is it just forcing them to face challenges that are more unnatural to them? Like little girls tend to be able to sit still for a much longer time than little boys. That's not saying that little boys, there's something wrong with them, or that little girls are just better. It's just that they have different natural tendencies. And so to answer your question about what age do they naturally take over their work and I can take a back seat, I never was able to take a back seat because they're always challenging me in different ways. But if you really allow them the freedom to explore topics of interest to them, and then give them guidance on how to best learn whatever skill or subject they want to, then you really, even at a very young age, can take more of a hands-off approach and let them explore that fully. And I am not saying that we don't give them guidance, because there's another part of the spectrum where parents just say, you can do whatever you want. This is free schooling. It's unschooling. We don't participate at all. You, as human beings, will do your own thing. I do feel that because we live in a society, we have an obligation to teach them skills that allow them to thrive in a societal situation. It's hands-on to give them structure, but it's hands-off for them to fully explore the subject, is the way I would answer it.
Yeah, it's hard to do that. I mean, I agree. Well, obviously, Tali and I agree. We don't want to go, we're not on the spectrum of full unschooling. We don't have anything against those that choose to do it. It's just, that's not where we are on the spectrum. On the other hand, I think we need, we as parents need to rethink what does a curriculum really look like to set someone up for success. And memorizing historical facts when I can look them up anytime with whatever AI or internet search, is that really something that's going to help them be successful later? So I think we just need to rethink what are the subjects, understanding energy literacy, food, understanding what we're actually eating and how the body works, and exercise, and how important sleep is. A lot of these other types of things, those are things that can help in the very long term. It can help them take on the world. And if you give them those first principle frameworks to work with, those are what should be in the curriculum. I mean, they're going to learn how to read, and they need to know some basic math. But do they need to know the color of the dinosaurs, or I don't know, something that we spend some amount of time on. So I do think you have to take a stand on, okay, they're pushing back on this subject. Maybe it's Latin. I would push. If I was a kid and you try to teach me Latin, I would push back too. So, I mean, as a parent, you're going to have to make your choice on that spectrum. Where are you on that? And maybe it'll change over time. Maybe it's different between kids. Maybe it's different by subject, whatever it is. But I think ultimately it comes back to it's on you, the parent. You're the one that has responsibility for that. The school, the administrators, the bureaucrats, whoever whatever outside forces, you as a parent have to make that decision. And exactly where you on that spectrum, whatever that is, that's what's right for you. It's not for me to tell you you're right or wrong because you're too far one way or another. But don't you dare try to tell me where I should be on that spectrum. Like basically, you need to back off. These are my kids. You as an administrator or bureaucrat, whatever you are, you need to stand away.
Well, the other thing I wanted to add is when we think of of education, when we think about educating our children, one of the first things that and the most common thing I hear is I want my child to reach their full potential. And so in our mind as parents, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking we have to be the feeder of knowledge. Open your mouth and here's a fact and here's a logic or something. But ultimately, the love of learning is a very natural human desire and it lasts your entire lifetime. So I see now in hindsight that my primary job really should have been don't kill their love of learning. Because if you don't kill it, they're going to be okay. And one example I want to just raise is my brother, all through school, was terrible at math, and probably the way they taught it was the reason, but he was terrible at math. He saw himself as being terrible at math. He talked about being terrible at math. Everybody looked at him as being terrible at math. But when he graduated and became a store manager, knowing accounting was necessary for the success of his job. And guess what he did? Went back to school, took accounting, which I think is very boring, but he aced it because there was a need. And the love of learning didn't necessarily play a part, but he was able to accomplish it. So many of us go through school and our love of learning is just completely squashed to the point we feel like once we complete our degree, the learning is over because God, that was terrible. But the truth is, if you look at little children, every child loves learning. That is a natural human trait. So I'm looking at it now as a veteran homeschooling mom. I want to tell the new homeschooling moms that's one of the primary things you should pay attention to is don't kill the love of learning.
It's a superpower because then anything changes in the world of technology we don't know about, whatever it is, if they know how to learn, then they are going to be able to adapt versus someone who can only take instruction and needs structure from some authority to say, your next step is X, your next step is Y, your next step is Z. And so the level learning how to learn, that is a game changer. If you kill it because you make learning horrible, yeah you really handicapped them.
It's a tough balance for sure, but you're spot on with everything on that front. Maybe final question on the homeschool front. Now that your kids are older, you've mentioned a couple are getting married or already gotten married, kind of getting that next step in life. If they choose to have kids one day, do you think they'll go down that route with their kids? Do you have that sense or too early to tell?
Yeah, so I asked our son, the one who just celebrated his 1-year anniversary, and he and his wife both were homeschooled. They have already decided they're going to homeschool. So I know that they will. The one that's engaged right now, we've talked about it as well. And I understand that they also plan to homeschool. The other two, since they're not anywhere near that life stage, they don't know yet. But ultimately, I think once, because of all the things we talk about all the time, they might roll their eyes at us when they walk by. I'm like, oh my gosh, mom and dad are talking about that again. But they know how they were brought up and how much freedom they had and the relationships they enjoyed. And all they have to do is talk to someone else who went through a different experience and make that comparison. They know the better, in our opinion, the better option. And I believe they will choose that.
So just to get a little nuance with you, Scott, I would, for fun, I would make a prediction that at least one of the other two that we haven't been talking about, maybe both of them, they might turn to Tali and say, hey, you want to homeschool again, but with your grandkids, right? So, but what it makes me think of is that let me say this right. There are a lot of options. You have a lot of options. It comes down to what do you want to do for parenting? And let's say that you agree that you want to have the relationship with your kids and that public schools are not going to give what you want them to have. But you may not have the temperament, or there may be some other reasons why homeschooling is not right for you. Well, then you get into co-ops, which essentially would be You get a group of homeschoolers together, and Tali teaches Chinese, I teach math, and you teach writing or something, right? We could get together. Then you have micro schools where you say, well, we don't even want to figure out who's going to teach what, but collectively we're all going to get together and hire a private teacher. And they're going to do a co-op, but we're going to outsource it to an actual teacher. And then you, of course, get into private schools and extracurricular things. So where I'm going with that is there's a whole range of options that you have. When we talk about homeschooling, I think what we're really talking about is taking self-custody of your parenting on that. And we label it homeschooling, but it really comes down to you taking control of how you want your kids to be educated, how you want to be a parent. And there's different flavors within how you do that. So I actually think with the other two kids we haven't talked about, with their personalities, I could see them trying to recruit her and saying, we may not have the right temperament to do this ourselves, but hey, mom, how'd you like to relive the homeschooling years and take care of your grandkid? I think that's possible.
Well, it'll be interesting to see in the coming years. Well, perfect. There's so much very valuable homeschooling knowledge that was dropped over those questions that I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy. And before we jump into those final two questions, I'll just remind everybody you're welcome to use code BFF Show for 10% off anything at shamari.com. So feel free to use that to your heart's content. Happy to send stuff your way. And so let's wrap things up with those final two questions. The first being, a common saying in the Bitcoin space is Bitcoin is time. Another belief is that time is the scarcest asset the world has ever created. So playing off of all that, what is the biggest gift of time that learning about Bitcoin has provided your family?
I guess I'll go first on that. It was 3 years ago, almost exactly now, when we decided to go full time. So the idea of free market kids, that had already been there. And I had that even when I was working my fiat job and I had designed an earlier game, but I was still doing the fiat. And what's interesting is, first of all, I've had more purpose in life than the mission of what we're doing is so important that I feel much more fulfilled. But it's also scary because as an entrepreneur, it's different when everything's on you and what you do, and you get that market feedback because something sells or doesn't sell. It's a little scary. But from a time perspective, the thing that I think has been really, really, really valuable has been spending more time with our kids, or our kids getting to see Tali and I work together on something hard that we believe in together. And even if we're working on the business and they're not helping with that, they still see us doing it because we're doing it from the house. So they're seeing that. So I feel like the quality of the time with our kids, because I had always spent most of my waking hours at a fiat job, trying to reconnect for some of that lost time that I had while I was doing that. And so for me, that comes back to Bitcoin. If we hadn't have made this decision, hadn't gone down these rabbit holes, and hadn't felt so passionately about trying to help others with what we had learned, then I wouldn't be having these experiences with the kids now that we've been able to have. And so that's a gift, if you will, it's a different kind of gift that's come out of the experience of trying to make free market kids viable company that has the potential impact on thousands, 100,000s, millions, whatever we were going to eventually reach. That's huge. It's really, really huge. But time with the family has been something that I didn't expect to get out of that, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Very nice. How about you, Tali?
I was thinking about that question. Sure, exactly how to answer it, actually, because when we talk about time, like time as currency, if you're new to the Bitcoin space and you're still in the rat race, the idea that Bitcoin gives the gift of time is far in the future. It's far in the distance, because unless you already have a bunch, because you got in early, you can feel like you're playing catch up. So for the newbies, I'm not sure Bitcoin equals the gift of time until it plays itself out, maybe over the next few decades. I would say Bitcoin is hope more than Bitcoin is time right now, where we are in the development of this concept. And I would just encourage families out there to continue learning. And if nothing else, give the gift of knowledge to their children, because if you and I and Scott, the other Scott, had known about this early on, at least for the two of us, we would have made different career choices. We would have invested our time differently. But that's hindsight, right? Not everybody well, nobody gets to go back and do anything over, but you can give that gift to your children because they are at the point now, a junction point where Bitcoin is starting to come up and more people are talking about it, and they can benefit from it eventually becoming a medium of exchange, but they won't if they're stuck in the fiat mindset of you got to get good grades, you got to go to the good college, you got to incur all of this student debt and then get a good job and then your future will be secure, which is such a huge, huge lie that most people are still selling and most young people have bought into today even. So I would just say for the newbies especially, I think for the people who have been around for a while, coin is time, but for the newbies, give the gift of knowledge to your children.
Yeah, I think
Very
all
well
the time
said.
with the kids and the relationship is you already got that even before well, I hope that didn't make a lot of noise on you, Scott. The idea of spending your time and building the relationship with your kids, that's something that Tali, even before Bitcoin, understood. And so I don't know. I think if you were advising newbie Bitcoiners, I think if you get too theoretical about it, they're just gonna say, okay, you're gonna go join your little your laser-eyed group and do whatever. If you speak to parents in terms of the time is a scarce asset, you ever heard where someone does the math and how much time you're going to spend with your kids, and then after 18, what percent you'll spend with the kids, and it's like almost nothing, right?
Mhm.
It's a small fraction. If I was talking to parents, I would phrase it that way. The fact that you can relate the principles of what you're talking about to Bitcoin, I'm not sure I would bring that up right away. I think you might lose people. I think it's fun to talk about because we see both sides. But if you were trying to explain to somebody, I would just start with that parenting relationship and investing the time you have with them. That's where I would start.
Makes complete sense. Well, perfect answer to that question. Very deep, and that brings us to the final one. If you had one Bitcoin to give each of your kids, at what age would you give them the keys, and why?
Working. I don't know. I wish we had it to give to them.
Well,
That'd be kind
no,
of cool. I don't think the kids, from what I can tell, they're still not there yet. They know that mom and dad think this is amazing and we're going to go to conferences and do podcasts and do all these things. They're tolerant of us because we're mom and dad, but they're not like picking up the Bitcoin flag and saying, "Hey, we're on it." And there is something to when the brain fully develops too. It's at mid-20s, especially for males. So I think one creative way to do this would be you give them a whole Bitcoin, but it has a time lock on it. And the time lock they can't do anything with it until they're 25. Right. So it's that way they have it. They know it's theirs. They have the key to it. But if you put a time lock on it, they can't, they can't actually, they can't actually spend that Bitcoin or move that Bitcoin until sometime later to get through some of those periods in the early 20s when you might be tempted to make a decision you'll later regret with where you put your money. So I would use a time lock. I would say give it to them early. They can be teenagers and understand it. You don't have to wait till they're 18. But I would probably consider a time lock.
I would disagree with that.
Let's hear it.
At this point, Scott's like, really? No kidding. You guys
Yeah. Well,
disagree?
we started with the disagreements. We'll end it. Perfect.
I think the assumption behind having a time lock for kids to receive this kind of wealth is that they might lose the wealth, which is a very scarcity mindset versus saying, depending on the readiness of the child, which based on my experience with my four kids, readiness, that word applies to different kids at different ages in different subjects. So a child who is 17 could be years ahead of another person who's 25 in terms of their intention and their goal for money gift that you give them, right? So if you think of it from the opposite point of view, not scarcity, but plenty. Let's say you do give a child the one Bitcoin when he's 17 because he had a business goal and he was going to apply it toward a business plan that he thought out and talked about and strategized, et cetera, and he fails, let's say. The whole Bitcoin is gone. It's wasted or used up. That whole process wasn't a waste because equally you could have given him $100,000, whether it's dollars or Bitcoin, to try that business idea. He would have, in exchange with the mistakes, learned the lessons. So if you think of it from the idea of plenty, sure, it's possible they may have lost the money, but they will earn it back in other ways because they have learned the life lessons. So I just disagree that it needs to be a specific age or a lock or any kind of assumption, except that, again, I go back to what I said before, all people are wired to thrive in whatever way
So
makes
what time
most
would you?
sense to
But
them.
what age would you give then? Because that was a question. When would you do? You're gonna give them
I
to 'em at different times?
Yeah, I think it's fluid. I
Well,
think it depends on the person. And the reason that will work is with a lot of communication. So our 4 kids, if I gave one person some money and the other person didn't get it because we talk about it openly, they're not gonna be like, well, how come you gave him money and you didn't give me money?
100% they're gonna do that.
No, they wouldn't.
Yes.
No, they wouldn't.
I guarantee you. Guarantee the younger one's watching the older one, and they said, "Hey, mom gave so and so that at 16 or 17 or pick whatever time
I
you
have
want." They're right.
never heard them say that, ever. Okay, so
Okay,
what is the biggest gift a
sorry.
parent gives to the child as they're growing up? Wouldn't you say it's the car, the first car, right?
Probably in a
The
lot of
biggest
cases,
gift,
I would guess. I would
right?
guess.
Because
Yeah.
it equals freedom, which is what young people want. I have never heard any of our kids discuss who got a first car at what age and I didn't get one, or like they don't talk about that because we communicate openly. And every time I make a major decision, I always tell them why so that they understand that it wasn't just like an arbitrary thing. And whether they agree with me or not, they know my why. So I don't feel like it would become an issue personally.
I
I
think the
think that's
idea
a
that they can learn from their mistakes. You give it to them, they spend it, and they lose it. They see that it's like the Three Little Pigs or something, right? They built different houses, right? So, one might use it more wisely than the others, and they get to see that, and then they all learn.
But
I can kind of
ultimately,
get.
if we don't see money, not in terms of currency units, but money itself as a scarce asset, then even if they lose it, they can earn more
Yeah.
going forward. It's not a loss, regardless, in my opinion.
Certainly a good question to get things going, Scott. I have to,
perfect way to end it. End it with the disagreements. We have a lot of, maybe there's a second episode. We can decide what the first date was, the answer to these questions. So we'll keep the audience on their toes.
We'll know who Satoshi is before we know the answer to the other question there on the date.
Perfect. Well, thanks a bunch for being here. I will put the links into Huddle Up and Free Market Kids and Orange Hatter and all that side of things. Any other places you guys want to send each other or send people or final words about, what you're building and what they can find from you guys?
Do you want to talk about the money literacy class?
Free Market Kids is where you can find all of our current products. One of the things that's on there is Fed Up. So it's a game that'll be coming out. The goal is to have it out by the end of the year, and you're either trying to end the Fed or you're trying to print baby print. And so if you want to support that, I am considering doing a crowdsourcing campaign for that. I haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. And I'm working on a money course because next year I'm really looking at, instead of focusing on Bitcoin conferences, to really focus on the homeschooling conferences and to get out of this. If we want to have the impact, our mission is to have this impact on others. And if I tell you things that you already agree with, that's awesome. You and I have a nice conversation, but we haven't had the potential impact that we could. And so right now that's at freemarketkids.academy. And right now it just shows up as a wait list because I haven't, the course is all done. I just haven't done all the recordings yet.
Very nice. I will link to all that in the notes, and Tali, any place you want to send between Orange Hatter and Pebble and Wave or any other things you want to shout out for people?
Yeah, absolutely. Orange Hatter is where I gather a group of women together and we do reading club And ultimately, I'm going to do a public speaking club so women can share Bitcoin knowledge with more confidence. So definitely check out orangehatter.com. Super-kay.com is where I describe all of my books for early readers. And in those books, I talk about not only virtues like honesty, integrity, creativity, friendship, love, but I also sneak in money literacy concepts. And at the end of every book is a call to action for kids to then turn around, look at their own lives and their own actions and record a small win every single day. So that the idea is as they get older, and of course, we want to tell them about Bitcoin, tell them about the truth of what's happening with our monetary system. They have a very solid foundation of self value, self worth, what they stand for, so that they will be ready for the next level of knowledge. And that's on superk.com. All the books are available on Amazon. And Pebble and Wave is my new endeavor where I share parenting coach resources. So check that out if you're wanting some help to break generational cycle of going from negative to positive parenting.
Perfect. Well, like I said, I'll drop all that in there so people don't have to remember it. So hit the show notes up to be able to get those links out. I'll co-sign everything that Scott and Tali put together. So go check those out. Say hi to them, whether it's a Bitcoin conference, a homeschool conference, or just walking down the street. Go say hi and get to know them. Be able to see their work and the people they are. Well, thanks everybody for watching or listening. Thanks for being here for another week, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Hi, thanks for joining. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a good review. And buy your kids some stuff at summary.com today. Bye. 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 Bye.